Welcome to the Phoenix Prosperity Podcast, where wealth meets legacy. Join your host, Tim Fergestad, as we explore the journeys of Phoenix's finest to success and beyond.
All right, this is Tim Fergestad. Thank you for joining us. I'm very pleased to have Leah Braddell with me here today, CEO and Chief Data Officer of Data Biologics. Leah is at the forefront of regenerative medicine, leading the development of AI-driven solutions that leverage a specialized database to transform patient care. Awesome. Welcome to the show, Leah.
Thanks, Tim. I'm excited to be here.
All right, so how long have you been in not just on this current startup project? That's the main focus you're working on, is that right?
Yes, that's the main focus. Yes, I have a lot of interests, but
right, you wear a lot of hats. But how long have you been in the med tech industry?
Medical. So I guess formally over 20 years. But when I think about me, just in my entire life, I've been obsessively passionate about all things medicine and especially surgery since I was 8 or 9 years old. Probably.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was the kid, when the Discovery Channel used to be like all medical shows, like, ER trauma.
Oh, yeah.
You could watch surgical procedures. That was my, I wasn't watching cartoons. I was watching, open heart surgery just because it was
fascinating.
Yeah. I just was like, oh my gosh, this is so interesting. What could be done? And then I had some experiences early in life with very close, family members and close friends who had relatives pass from cancer. And when I was, very close to what the family had to go through and the treatment and then ultimately just the really horrible death that patients with cancer ultimately experience.
Right.
And when you're that young, it's very traumatic. And so I thought, okay, if cancer can start, why can't it be reversed? Why can't it be stopped? Like, what is it? How did that happen to that person? And so that just kind of set my whole mindset from a very young age that I belong to medicine in one shape, or another. And that's kind of what's happened. It's been many shapes, but I've been in medicine for a long time.
Okay, excellent. I thought you were going to say like you were like doing surgery on your stuffed animals as a child or something. And
that's possible. I was, as soon as they brought out the frogs in science class, I was like, wow, this is great. Okay. Yeah, I definitely did not shy away from that. And I've been fortunate to work with technologies for many, many years that allowed me to not operate on live humans, but I have gotten to perform many, many surgical procedures within a lab environment as part of the process of, training and supporting surgeons who are adopting new technology. So I got my fill for sure.
Well, you still get to scratch that itch, I guess.
Exactly. It's just been scratched many times.
Okay, excellent. How about the regenerative medical side? When did you get
that's also an interesting story. So my degree, the path I went on in college, my degree is in cellular molecular tissue engineering. And so really specific. It was one of the only at Arizona State. So yay, ASU. But they were one of the only programs in the country at the time that had a formal biomedical engineering degree, but especially in this kind of very new and emerging concept of, we can actually like harness like biology to regenerate organs or to create cell systems or to create, new materials that can be implanted in the body to do different things. And that was just absolutely, fascinating to me. So my, path there and what I studied really deeply and then went into a PhD program for was actually in the space that I'm now in today. Nice. But the reason I left the academic track and went into industry and ultimately spent most of my career in sales and marketing of medical devices and surgical robotics primarily, which is totally different than materials, was, the reality of how long is it going to take before any of this gets to the actual
Market,
patient.
right?
Yeah. And this was at the time when we had just started the ability to like synthesize peptides and sequence things. And, there was like computers. We just had computers for a few years and any kind of like commercial level setting. So it was just sort of maybe this is too soon. And maybe I'm better served, or I'm better serving my passion by being in the field where technology is actually being,
Right.
used with patients. So that's how I ultimately jumped out of it. But as I kind of progressed through that career and became more and more intertwined with the need for evidence, and when new things emerge in medicine, and you and I were talking just before this, it's not always, price to play is a clinical paper, a clinical trial. You have an FDA approval, which that just means kind of a variety of things. There's varying levels of what being an approved device really means. Right. That's a price to play, but it's not what actually is the driver for physicians making decisions about what technologies they're going to use in practice with patients. Right. Those decisions are usually made through their specific unique experience. And in medicine, everybody's experience is completely siloed to the specialty that they're in, and to the fellowship and the residency program that they went through, and to the physician societies that they affiliate themselves with. And the consensus there matters far more than any consensus that they might get out of, a high level evidence paper, or an FDA approval, or a slick marketing campaign from a high-powered pharmaceutical company. Those are all things that are just secondary to what the physician's own instinct is telling them, and then who they go and respect. So in that, I got to be right there, right next to physicians making decisions on new treatments. And sometimes those treatments, like adding a robot to your practice, was a big risk, a huge risk, and required a lot of training and a lot of commitment and a lot of convincing of all your staff and of your patients and everybody else. And the hospital had to spend millions of dollars. So there wasn't it wasn't just an easy decision to make. And almost always they required some evidence. And first that evidence had to come from someone they respected. Like, hey, have you used this before? How did your patients do? Do you have any... and most doctors don't publish. They don't have the resources to run
or the
research.
Time
or the time. Yeah. But they have a lot of experience. Every case has something that they have learned, and now it's just living with them. And they share that with their friends. They share that at these medical conferences and in small circles. And the companies that win are the ones that facilitate that the best, when they know how to connect the right peers and support the physicians to really extract the story. What is your experience? So I did that along the way.
Right. Which is incredibly valuable, but sort of probably 15 years ago or whatever, sort of got attacked, right? Because it was. Oh yeah. It was that people on the outside didn't appreciate it and understand what was going on in those environments.
Yeah, and you just don't. I think the general public would be, I wouldn't say shocked, but very unaware of how much companies that supply technology, how much involvement they have at a personal level with physicians. I mean, there's lots of rules and laws put in place about, you can't bribe people and pay people and all, there are transparency
I'll take you to dinner so you buy my robot.
Yeah. But part of it is this is a human-centered business. This is humans making decisions about humans. When you think about a plane, right? In an engineering of a plane, it's a hugely complex piece of equipment. Same with a robot, but most people understand a plane. They get on an airplane, they know there's a whole lot of buttons and controls. Every part can be replaced. We know exactly how it was built, exactly how to take it apart and repair it. We don't know that about the body. We have just signals and surfaces. We don't even have the computing power yet to fully model all of the communications that go on within a cell. That by itself is a massive amount of data that is being communicated through chemical signals. So to think that we have this like, bullet, and maybe I'll pull the controversy of, Tylenol and autism today, but
okay.
It's,
we're recording this late September 2025.
Yeah, don't know what it'll be tomorrow, but it's maybe there's a connection, maybe there's a link. There's so many other variables there though that have to be controlled for, that in most cases are almost impossible to control for, right? What is the reason somebody took Tylenol in their pregnancy? Was it they had a fever? Was the fever the cause of the autism? What was the cause of the fever? So there's like these other questions that just go deeper and deeper and deeper, which is this kind of in the same, you studied chemistry and neuroscience. So you understand, like, you keep asking the next smallest question. What's smaller than a cell? What's smaller than a molecule? What's smaller than an atom? What's smaller than a proton? Like, you keep going down, 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 and you realize, like, oh yeah, we don't really know much about what really goes on. So all we can work with are the signals on the surface. And the best signal that we have, and especially in now the getting back to your question of how did I get into regenerative medicine? The field of regenerative medicine as it stands today, like there's the current state of cell therapies and biologics, which really are minimally engineered. There isn't a lot of options out there yet that are truly engineered in the sense of like the things I was doing in graduate school. These are technologies that are taking blood from your body, bone marrow, fat, minimally processing that in some way. So, the hypothesis being if we concentrate a certain type of cell that like platelets or monocytes or mesenchymal stem cells, if we concentrate those and put them into a diseased area of the body, knowing that those cells have certain properties, the theory is that it can do something to maybe regenerate tissue. Nobody can prove that yet. But what they can show, and what it does show now, is it does something because people report improvement in pain, improvement in function, and a lot of satisfaction when it's done when it's done right. But being done right, there's zero consensus. There's 1,000 ways that physicians are offering these treatments, and there's minimal, if practically no, guidelines from the FDA or other large societies, because every patient is unique. Your cells are your cells, mine are mine, and there's no way to really standardize that. So it's really hard for a drug company to come in a traditional framework and say, we own the patent on this thing for the next 20 years. We're going to put hundreds of millions of dollars down, and then we're going to make billions of dollars on the back end. You can't do that on your blood.
And I'd also add that one of those big challenges, at least in the U.S., is our slow adoption here.
Yes, yeah, and that all comes down to who's paying for it, and who has the megaphone. So, in regenerative medicine today, these types of treatments, so PRP, I would say, is the beachhead, platelet-rich plasma. Fast growing, minimal requirement in terms of like training and licensing. License to inject and is all you need. You don't actually have to have any kind of credential or certification. There are societies like the Interventional Orthobiologics Foundation, the Biologics Association, the Orthobiologics Institute. Those are just some of kind of the higher, but there's many others too that are smaller organizations of physicians, typically kind of born from whatever the specialty of the original leadership. So these specialties are, physiatry, physical medicine rehab, sports medicine, pain management, orthopedic surgery, functional medicine, osteopathic medicine. So there's different specialties that kind of initiate these groups. And now what's happening is these groups are starting to consolidate and become bigger and bigger organizations. And what they're offering to the broader community is a way for people with a license to inject to come and learn a standardized approach or a method with evidence to back it up. And so we're seeing both publications and studies, some more formal high level evidence come out. But where my company fits in is we enable everyday practice, whether they're in an academic program or not, to track data on every case they do, so that when they go to these conferences, they can actually get up and say, I don't just think this works, but I have 1,000 patients in my practice that we've been tracking for the last 3 years that are with this amount of pain reduction under these conditions, with this amount of satisfaction. And on the flip side of that, they're also able to look at, well, here's what we're a case that didn't go the way that we thought it should. And how can we understand, maybe going back to the beginning and saying, was this the right candidate for this treatment? Why did this treatment work for this patient and not this patient? What are the variables that might be driving that? And then can we now study that further? So what it does is it informs more design, more thoughtfulness about how should we study these treatments going forward. And then our platform enables collection of the details you need, like dose. There's not been a consensus on what is the right amount of cells to inject into, a patient who has knee osteoarthritis versus a, rotator cuff tear versus looking for hair replacement. Like, this is all the different things that people are using PRP for. So we have the mechanism and the largest database of cellular profile on these biologic treatments in the space today. And now we're working with large institutions, big academic centers, to analyze and publish on that data. And also companies who sell these products are working with us to put a lot more structure in how they study it. Yeah, exactly. Because we do see the benefits. People like these treatments. The problem is it's cash. And most of the time, so there's only so many people who can afford to pay cash for a treatment like this. But insurance companies, they won't cover it without a code. Codes are typically driven by industry, by pharmaceutical, by medical device companies, or by the very large organizations like AMA and the AAOS, the big organizations of physicians who have the money and the lobbyists and the consultants and all of those people that you need to get a code. So it's a complex problem, but we're just sticking with the science on it and the belief that if you're offering something new and innovative, it can't just be anecdotal anymore. You have to track every case and let the data speak for itself.
Sure. And to your point on the standardization of that data as well, is some people inject fresh PRP. Some people wait, they freeze it, and so without a standard protocol and stuff, it's not always apples to apples.
Exactly.
So Data Biologics is using AI to help source or pick through and analyze a lot of the data you're collecting.
Yeah. So we're developing what we've spent most of the first couple of years developing is really the data model. So in any kind of AI application, you have to have high volume of highly structured, clean data. So the AI is not going to be able to say, oh, this is a good outcome, that's a bad outcome. We have to define that through the data first, so that the AI can be trained to know, okay, this is what the threshold for improvement needs to be considered a clinically significant outcome, and these are the variables that we have to control with. So what we've built is a proprietary data model and a natural language query. So just like you go to Chat GPT and you can ask it questions, but it's querying the internet or its repository of data that it was trained on. Here we have our data model coming from patients, coming from physicians in a structured form, already processed with the what's called attribution, with the tags that you need to say, this is the kind of treatment that was delivered, this is the dose profile, this is the outcome, these are the factors we're controlling for. And now what we need is we want to summarize that. And we want to generate a clinical paper, or we want to generate a poster, or we want to generate a webinar for physicians to share with each other. So we help physicians accelerate from collection to communication. So it's, most doctors have at some point, whether they have a platform like ours or not, have tried to collect data. They have some spreadsheet, or maybe their kids home from college for the summer. Hey, will you go through my case and put it all into this like Excel file? And I got some other guy that will do the work on the data, so it's always becomes this like 10-year project to get like an analysis on 20 cases,
right.
out
To
of
your point, speed is paramount.
Yeah. And so we're basically, from the moment they enroll a case into Data Biologics, and once the patient starts to respond to the automated system, immediately the doctor has information that they can use in consultation with their patients, use it for their practice management. So we have practices that use the data to quality control. So they're looking at, okay, how do all of our different providers do? Is one better than the other? Why is that happening? Or they're using it to present at medical conferences to say, I'm going to showcase my case series of 50 cases that I deployed this protocol with, and here's the outcomes, and let's have a discussion with other physicians. Or they're working with medical device companies who are doing studies, or just general, like the way business is done, marketing and sales enablement for the next growth of a new treatment.
Okay, it's very exciting stuff to be able to have that sort of impact coming up. So Data Biologics, what are some of the goals over the next 12, 18, 24 months?
Yeah, so we have grown from, just was initially a physician-founded company, and it wasn't actually ever intended to become a, AI technology company. It was really physicians who were pioneers in the field who needed a solution for their own practice. Where I was, and I got involved in the company a little over 3 years ago, I was really looking for, my, like, I guess, some people play guitar and paint. Data is my art, like building databases. It's like a puzzle to me. I find it to be like it's fun. And especially if it's data that doesn't exist anywhere. And that's the thing about cash pay treatments, regenerative treatments, all these things are not at all defined in any current system. There's no claims for it. There's no records. There's no standardization. So when I connected with these founders and understood, like, okay, you guys are in this emerging space, you're passionate about it, you're seeing good outcomes, there's a lot of controversy. We need to be a lighthouse in the dark on it. And no one had gotten into the database yet to see what was in it. And so that was kind of the first thing I did, was say, okay, what do we have here to work with? Is there anything real? Is this all snake oil, or is there something that I can really get behind and help bring it forward? And so that's just evolved to, actually, there's something really huge here, and there is even more application beyond just regenerative medicine. In fact, we've already expanded beyond just the traditional orthopedic biologics. We're tracking all these new devices in the energy space, lasers, shockwave, electromagnetics. We're adding surgical procedures. We're working with a really innovative, outpatient facility that's the first of its kind in Canada that is looking to do some really interesting new things within the healthcare model there. So we just saw this is the framework for how we make it possible for everyday practices and companies that aren't the big guys, that are the small companies that don't have the resources to do all the things I got to do when I was working in the big industry. And so now where we are, we've raised a seed round. We're getting ready to formally launch a Series A. We've grown our team. We have about 12 people now, across the engineering and commercial teams. We're now working with hundreds of clinics, hundreds of providers, and we're in a number of medical device companies. And we're the premier preferred data collection platform for all of the societies in the biologic space. So I think that evolution from this was just something for a group of physicians to support their own interest, to now we think that this applies to everybody, and we're a clinical intelligence platform, not just an outcomes in regenerative medicine platform.
Okay. And I imagine your partners are across the U.S., but are they also international?
Yeah. So
Because
today
there's a
we
lot
operate in
outside of the U.S.
Canada.
that's been going
Yeah.
longer, but
It's interesting. We have a very long list of the outside of US interests. The challenge when you're in the healthcare data space, it would be one thing if we were buying data and just doing analytics. We do analytics, but we also are the platform that collects and generates the data. So
okay.
when you're collecting protected health information, and we work directly with the clinics on that, there are a lot more rules around that kind of data. And every country has their own kind of
HIPAA?
version of it. HIPAA, GDPR, PIPEDA, then even the UK has a different GDPR, which we just started up in the UK. So it's, as an early stage startup, all of that, and probably the bane of my existence as an early stage CEO is lawyers. That would be it.
Okay.
Everything is, to write a contract and revise that language. It's always a significant upfront cost just to get set up to do the that you do. So we have to be really strategic about how much we expand. And then that doesn't even factor in, okay, we need people who can support those countries and maybe speak that language. And so there's different, business development that's required for every new market that you expand into. So we primarily stayed today in the US and Canada. We recently added ability in the UK. But we're very well aware and have a pretty the world than it is in the US,
Okay.
and want the ability to track outcomes, especially on things that are like flat out banned here, but people from the US are flying to, Mexico and the Bahamas and wherever else in the world that they're allowing it to be done. I'm not one to say that's good or bad or works or doesn't. I don't know yet. I need to see the data. But what we do know is people are spending tens of thousands of dollars and going into countries that don't have the same level of kind of, while there's lots to complain about in our country, there's a lot more potential risk that you're putting yourself in to go get medical treatment outside of our country. So I think that there's a need for a centralized, unbiased third party that can aggregate the data from all these places and say, yeah, this treatment is showing good promise in this kind of patient population. How can we put more guardrails to it? Because the dark side of the industry is it's cash and it's hope. People are sick of just taking Tylenol or just taking opioids or getting surgery. Younger and younger people are getting joint replacements, and joint replacement isn't always like, well, it's definitely not. If you talk to anybody who's had one, it's not like it's a walk in the park and you're just like, oh boy, I'm just like bionic, man, now I can
18 again.
Yeah, no, there's recovery, there's complication, and then there's revisions. And the younger you get a surgery, especially like spine surgeries, the more likely you are to have to get it again or get something done again. And once you've disrupted that, what they call it, like a salvage procedure. Once you've disrupted that, it makes the surgeries that much more harder and more likely to get a complication. Yep. So there's implications for the patients, implications for who pays for the treatments that need to be solved for, but without a Pfizer or Moderna or the big guys with billions of dollars putting the money behind the type of evidence needed to get all of that, there's nobody that's going to do it. And so it's like a guerrilla militia here trying to get the data and compile it. And so we're just trying to be that sort of unbiased third party. We're not selling medical services. We're not selling medical devices. We are the aggregator of data and information in this field, wherever it comes from. And we're trying to present that back to a physician and a patient audience in a way that helps them make better decisions.
Right. Okay. So you're always looking for, not always, I don't know. Are you always looking for more groups or practices to work with and serve, as well as looking for shareholders and backers to grow the company?
Absolutely. Yeah. So now what we're doing, I just recently brought on an EVP of sales. So he's just amazing, Martin Cody. He's been in the industry for 40 years and just has a ton. He actually just wrote me this morning. He's like, I'm going to post this podcast I just did, I did. It happened to be, on this topic. And so now that we're at this stage, we've got our platform, and we've got, all the processes in place that we need to grow and scale. Now we're ready to really push that forward. So right now we have a new website under development, one that's going to really help us bring, what's important in all of this, what we're doing, that there isn't really a competitor directly for me, but generally collecting data in healthcare that's not new. Like that's kind of a standard. There's a lot of solutions for these things, but what the solutions are geared for are more for compliance and for getting paid. And so it's not so much on how do we know which treatment works best. It's more about how do I get paid for this, and how do I report to the big guy that's watching me and will shut me down if I don't. Like that's kind of the purpose that most of the applications that are collecting patient reported outcomes are serving today. And so for us, we have figured out how to work with small practices. So single doctors with just an MA, they can get on our platform for a reasonable price and be able to collect data as if they were in a big academic program and have all the resources available to them. Most companies won't even talk to a practice like that sell a software like we do. And so for us, it's really important to maintain the ability for every doctor to collect data, but at the same time, we're looking to scale and working more and more. We're starting to work with large enterprise organizations where they have hundreds of providers in their organization, or they're big companies that have products that they want to study and maybe even pursue different FDA indications. So for us to balance a business like that, we're now we need to raise larger funds in order to scale that kind of an effort to work with large organizations. But at the same time, we want to keep the economics around servicing even small practices still available to us. So it's a balance that most companies like us typically say, oh, forget that guy. The one doc shop is not one that we care about. We do. We actually care a lot about that because they're still treating patients and we want to have those outcomes. So so I'm looking now for the right, I would say the right investors who understand the opportunity, not just in regenerative medicine, but generally with what real world data means for the industry and how it's a huge gap today for everything, how the requirement that has been set based on, decades of status quo and only if you have billions of dollars do you get your thing to market, that has to go away. That's why we're not getting the treatments that people need or want. We don't know who actually needs it because it's so narrowly limited. Like maybe 20 years ago, women weren't even included in medical trials because we got hormones and we could potentially be pregnant. And that's a real downer to a study if you've got to drop out a patient. Like it's just not, it's just, a change is required, and it starts with kind of grassroots, real world evidence, collect the data, and then let the treatments that work well get to market faster.
Right. And then a proper free market.
How
do those big groups and the small practices find you?
All of our work so far has been just word of mouth through the network. And as we talked, that's how everything in medicine is actually sold is physician to physician, peer groups. So we haven't put any money yet into marketing or advertising. Really our first big step here is in revamping our website and making that more robust and more segmented now that we have different types of customers that we work with. So we will likely be doing more promotional, maybe putting more financing behind marketing efforts. But for the most part, it's done through our network, through representing at medical conferences, working with, we're very fortunate to work with all of the thought leaders. In fact, they're pretty much all on my board. So we've really collected kind of the top
rock stars
minds
in the space
in the field, and that makes all the difference. And so that's only accelerated my ability to kind of bring what my experience has been and synthesize what this space needs and what these doctors are most concerned with and interested in. And then we just keep growing from there.
All right. Thank you, Leah. So if people, investors or practitioners would like to connect with you and learn more, where can they go? What should they do?
Yeah, so they can reach out to me direct. Leah@databiologics.com is my email. We're going to be having early conversations around our Series A round. We'll be looking for a lead investor. I'm planning to head to Silicon Valley in November for some of those conversations. I know we talked a little bit about this before, but I think one of the things in our Arizona community that's just been a disappointing gap has been funding and resources for companies at this stage. We have a significant investment community, but most are coming from kind of the real estate investment or, more later stage private equity where things have already been de-risked or the technology's already been kind of, really established into a business model. And to be an innovative, and especially now with what's going on with AI and what you need to make that successful, there's a lot of investment that's needed in a very early stage. And we just don't have that kind of investment community here yet in Arizona. So we're hoping to change that. So I'm working pretty close with the Arizona Commerce Authority. Nice. I'm also founder of the Arizona Nerd Network, which is a community of builders, and we're really advocating for more awareness, interest, structure, funds that actually are
shining the light on these entrepreneurs and these startups and developments.
Yeah. And it's not just about give us cash. It's about actually getting in, rolling up your sleeves and being part of the process, part of the journey. But I've found that most are geared for the later stage, and they're trying to apply that type of approach to an early stage. And it ends up just kind of sucking startups dry without providing any value. So I'm like, okay, but Silicon Valley knows how to do it. So that's why we're going to go there and talk to those guys.
Okay, excellent. All right. This has been great. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for listening and watching. Thank you very much, Leah Braddell, for joining me today. Very much appreciate you sharing all this and your journey, basically, and Data Biologics' future impact. This is all great stuff. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Tim. I appreciate it.
Inspired by our guests? Visit phoenixprosperitypodcast.com/guest and join us on the show and share your success story with Tim. The spotlight awaits.